as you can see, the lesson tonight, I'm really going to try to have mostly just one main point with some, I think, important applications. But just to be able to increase our awareness of what the devil is doing, what Satan is doing. I know probably you're very much like me. Maybe he doesn't cross our minds too much until something goes wrong, and then we go, he's up to it again, or something like that. But in a broad perspective, looking a little more carefully at these things. So before I get into that, I do want to say what a blessing we have had in the last 2 weeks to have Scott do the great lesson that he did, and then Ken do a fantastic lesson this morning. So needed. Those things are just so needed. And I just feel very, very blessed to be able to hear those good words. It reminds me of why God didn't just have an Amos, but had a Hosea. Just didn't have an Isaiah, but a Jeremiah. God utilized all these different characters and people and personalities. A lot of times we don't consider that when Isaiah preached, God used Isaiah's personality. He didn't just go robotically, give these words. Isaiah is part of that, and so is Hosea and Amos, and you see these kinds of things. And if I were a citizen in the northern kingdom of Israel, after hearing Amos, I would be going, yay, bring Isaiah. As somebody that's going to give me a little hope. Amos gave 5 verses of hope at the very end, but that was like, God, okay, Amos, you get the perfect personality to lay them out. And I love the idea of that. In a perfect world, we would just be able to listen to this kind of thing in these differences and all that every week, and it'd be a tremendous blessing. But that reality doesn't allow us to do that, so you're stuck with me. So there you go. And David and some really other good guys here. That's great. All right. So there's really an interesting phenomenon. You probably have noticed it in the world around us. How we do it. We all question, why are the evil people? I mean, you expect evil, but sometimes it is so absolutely extreme and gross that you just go, how does anybody do that? How does anybody get that bad? And it is really bothersome. And then you even go further and you think, how is it that such evil people become rulers of nations? That's incredible. And yet, the passage that was just read in Psalm 82, that's exactly what God is doing. He is coming down and whacking these gods who he had, according to Deuteronomy 32, he had placed over the nations in order to bring justice and righteousness to the people and give them knowledge. And Jesus contrasts himself with those gods when he quotes that verse. He quotes Psalm 82 in John 10 and actually says, I deserve to be the son of God, even though they were called gods, because they did not follow what a son of God should do. So you kind of go, whoa, the power that is displayed by the devil, by Satan, by his angels, by all of them is something just amazing. And of course, the phenomenon is not new. We've been studying kings. You see any bad kings? Goodness. I mean, you just want to gag after a while. Slap that guy. I mean, he's terrible. He burned his kids up. It's just so amazing. But that, I think, brings us to a reality that is hard for us a lot of times to accept. Now, I know it's hard for me to often accept that this spiritual warfare is so intense. And what is going on we need to be aware of. So people, a lot of times when something really bad happens, what do people do? well, I wonder what kind of parents they had, or I wonder what kind of, and we tend to oftentimes make excuses for them. Well, maybe they weren't taught morality. Maybe they weren't taught this or that, and we say these types of things. Well, those could have been contributing factors. But in Ezekiel 18, God said there are good people who produce children who are very, very bad, and then there are very, very bad people who produce children who decide to be very, very good. And he says, here's the bottom line, I don't care which it is, the soul who sins will die. And in 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10, he says, and everyone will stand before the judgment seat of Christ, and they will give an account for the things they have done, whether good or bad. Boom. There you go. So I want to hear your excuses. I want you to seek me and serve me, and if you don't, there's the end result. God's really, really straightforward about it, which is the reason God and us, we follow God in this, to love the world so that we can teach the world what God is about and help them escape from the snare of the devil. So in this lesson, here's the methodology of it. I decided just to look at the times Jesus talked about Satan. We can't go over all of them, but it is interesting to note that we look at Satan as Jesus saw him, and Jesus refers to Satan over 30 times in the Gospels. That was interesting to me just enough, just to think over 30 times, and he uses his name 30 times, but then there's many more times where he just refers to him in one way or another. So all of those times gives us a picture of Satan's character, of his purposes, of his methodology, and the things that he does. The one thing I'm not going to talk about this evening, I just didn't have time to, is illness is part of what Satan does. And we know that from Matthew chapter 8 and verse 16, when Jesus healed all kinds of people and then quoted Psalm 53 and said, this fulfills, and Matthew says this fulfills the passage that says, I bore their illnesses and I bore their weaknesses. And you go, I thought that was talking about spiritual sins. It was. But these illnesses are a result of what Satan has done. What did Job go through? And who caused it? You have that again, don't we? So we won't be able to talk about that, but just wanted to throw that out. That is one of the parts which is, of course, major, and we dealt with it in looking at the book of Job. So let's just start with this. First of all, Satan wasn't always Satan. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 16, he says, for by him all things were created, this is by Jesus, in heaven and on earth. Notice that, in heaven and on earth, everything created by who? By Jesus. Visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, who created the thrones and the rulers and the dominions and authorities? Jesus did. Somebody didn't walk in and say, I got this. He created those things and gave it to those things. And so all these things were created through him, and I want to emphasize those words, for him. So even the creation of the angels, later bad, Satan himself later turns away against God, all of that created good, of course, and created for Jesus. So we have this spiritual realm that we just have a little peephole and looking at and think about how immense this is, and yet God's will seems to have never been that he is just going to do everything. That's one of the things that has really struck me about in studying this about God. He's not in the business of, God could just say do it and it does. And he could say let there be light and there is. He could just say let there be people and there is. And all of these things and let you know what my word is and there is. But he's always using people. which has to do with our future in that spiritual realm as well. So all this is where Satan starts and where he's begun. So we start with what Jesus says about Satan. The first thing I think is important to understand is that he gives Satan, or he refers to names. You know the way God is. God didn't have a name just because it sounds nice or whatever. A name is given because it's descriptive of who this person is. So he gives these names: Satan, the devil, Beelzebub on one occasion. Satan and the devil, the more common way that he refers then to Satan. When you think of Satan, you need to think of this word, adversary. So Satan wasn't always an adversary. Satan takes the role of an adversary, and therefore he's referred to that way. Satan is the word used for Satan, other than the brief thing of serpent in the garden, but Satan is the Old Testament word, and then goes into the New Testament as well, of course. But Satan is the Old Testament word that God uses over and again to refer then to him, and he then has become an adversary, of course, to God. Now, Satan is obviously blessed with tremendous intelligence and tremendous power. So powerful that even some of his angels are not as powerful as God's angels. And we know that from the book of Daniel. Most of you recognize in the book of Daniel how there was an angel far more powerful than the angel that was sent to give Daniel an answer to prayer. So some of these angels are very, very powerful. You remember in Ephesians 6 and verse 12, there are rulers, authorities, and spiritual forces of wickedness. That sounds like admirals and generals and sergeants and all of these powerful beings that are within Satan's kingdom. And so he has great intelligence, great power. We see his character. And this is something that I'd never thought of until really fairly recently. If you want to know what Satan wants, desires, has in his heart, has in his mind, look at people. Look at yourself. He produces his own offspring. Jesus said he was a murderer from the beginning. Well, who murdered Abel? Cain. We just go, Cain killed Abel. No, he didn't. Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. But then Satan did it. And Satan produced an offspring that would do his will. So when you see the sinfulness of ourselves before we came to the Lord, and you see the sinfulness of the world, and you see the extremity in which they go to this sinfulness, you're getting a description of Satan. You're seeing who he is and how he thinks. When you see people who are full of pride and want power over others, you're seeing Satan. I always wonder, why do you want to tell people what to do all the time? What is it about you that wants to control everybody around? Dictator. Satan. That's the way Satan is. That's the way he thinks. That's the way he acts. He wants power. He wants self-power. He offered that to Eve. Power. You can have power. You don't have to do what God says. So this has been part of him the whole time. He produces an offspring. It is even Paul called one of the people that in the book of Acts, son of the devil. He is an offspring of the devil. And you see that in Genesis 3 and verse 15. The word devil is diabolos, slanderer or accuser. So here is a different word that adds to who he is and what he does. He's a slanderer. He's an accuser. We have a couple of passages that indicate that. Zechariah 3 verse 1. Then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. Imagine the high priest standing before an angel Lord, and here is Satan. How would you feel? You're getting ready to talk to an angel of the Lord, and you're standing there and you've been brought there, and Satan's right next to you going, I got all kinds of things on you. And I'm going to accuse you. And you think, what's Satan do? He is accusing you before God all the time. You can't save him. You can't save him. Look what he did. And you see it then in Revelation where he's conquered and says, "And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ has come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before God." Just imagine, day and night, Satan is accusing us before God. Finally, he's cast down, and that those accusations can be given no more because of what Jesus has done, conquering then the prince of this world and the accuser. So those two factors come into play. But what this reveals is Satan's desire to defeat mankind and defeat God's purposes. So when you think about that, you realize that what Satan is doing is, if I can get man to sin, then God can't promote him, right? God can't lift him up. God can't do anything that he said he was going to do. God can't have him in his presence, and God won't have him in his presence. So he defeats everything he told man that he would do. Give him dominion over the heavens and the earth and all that there is, and he's going to defeat all of those things. So here is Satan's turn in that way as he brings this about. I don't know if you recognize, but there are 3 times in Scripture where you hear Satan speak. Only 3. You'd almost think, oh, there's dozens of times. No, he's mentioned them. There's only 3 times he speaks. And every time he speaks, he's always slandering. In Genesis with Eve, he slanders God to man. In Job, he slanders man to God. And in the temptation in the wilderness with Jesus, he slanders the God-man to his face. And you just see him every time he opens his mouth, he's slandering somebody. He's trying to defeat everything God is about. And then, of course, there's the word Beelzebub. We won't spend much time on that. It comes from Baal, the master, and Zebub of the flies, the god of the flies, or the dung god, or thus the idea of the god of rottenness. The Pharisees referred to him as Beelzebub, and Jesus commented, yes, and gave that same name to Satan. But that's sufficient then for that. So there's three ways where I'm going to categorize Satan's purposes here. 1 is Satan's interjection into God's purposes. 2 is Satan's direct involvement in our lives. And then 3 is being aware of the danger of the devil and being more aware of what he is doing. So we just look at those 3 classifications in the next few minutes and just take a look at how this plays out in Jesus' own words. Just see what Jesus actually says here. So we start here with John 8 and look at Satan's direct involvement here in our eyes. Here's what Jesus says to the Jews in John 8. By the way, interestingly enough, John 8, as we're starting here in verse 43, but the whole text starts back in verse 31 and 32, or actually verse 30, 31 and 32, where the Scripture says the people he's talking to believed in him. It's the most shocking thing about John 8. He starts with the people who he's talking to believed him. And so they were seeing the miracles, they believed in him, and so Jesus tries to take them to the next level to get rid of their sin. And this is where the battle goes on between them. And so he gets to this point, and Jesus said, "Why do you not understand what I say? It is because you cannot bear to hear my word. You are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character." This is who he is, in other words. "For he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell you the truth, you do not believe." Do you catch there the emphasis that he is giving in this as to what really is the problem? Can you see it there? You can't bear my word. Why not? Because I don't like it. You ever heard a sermon that just beats you all over the place? Yeah, I have. I think Ken gave me a little beating this morning too, and needed it. So do we ever hear those things? Yeah. Do we like it? Well, if we love the Lord and we love what's true, we do, because we know we need to become more like Him. But they don't want to hear this. They don't want to change. Your will is to do your Father's desires. Your will is not to do God's desires. You are happy where you are. And then if I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. Some people hate hearing the truth. We live in a world where the truth is the last thing most people want to hear, unfortunately. Don't want to hear the truth. Paul even said that to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. He says, if somebody comes to you and preaches a Jesus you haven't heard of, or gives a new spirit that you have never heard of, you accept it gladly. But when I talk to you, out the back door. So it's very interesting to see what our brains can do, what's possible in our minds. And that's what Jesus talks about. This is what Satan does. He convinces us that our way and our thoughts are better and than what God has actually given. Look at how Satan then is involved in changing our will and our desires. And this is the major part of what we want to talk about tonight, is he's in the business of changing what we want, what our will is, and what our desire is. So watch what happens. Why would a person not give full loyalty to God? Now, this could be a person who comes to church regularly, could be me or you, any of those things. But full loyalty is what God asks. Why would we not do that? Because I don't want to. Because, as one person said to me, I don't feel like it. Okay, well, who asked you about your feelings? God didn't. This is where the word submission is so critically important. I think Chip and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago. But the word submission is so critically important. Because we can do 95% of what God says, and that doesn't make it submission. Because if I'm taking 5% of what He says and deciding not to do it, then the 95% was just doing it because I agreed with Him. I like that part of my life. So submission is giving full loyalty to Him. And when we don't, the reason is because I don't want to. And putting I don't want to into regardless, that's what I do because I want to please Him. And we train our hearts and minds to actually eventually want to do that. I would imagine that if I asked the question, how many of you really, really want to take a daily bath or shower? Just about everybody would say yes, except for the 7 and 8 year olds possibly, or something like that. You might have a battle with them. But what does a parent do? No, you're going to take a bath. And pretty soon, when they hit about 13, you can't get them out of there because they want to take a bath. They have learned that it is valuable, and that's what we do with God. We keep acting ourselves into a new way of feeling. That's submission, but it's also a way of changing our hearts into the wanting to do the actual will of God. So here's the thing. Jesus gave the answer to why people don't give full loyalty when He gave those parables. Remember in Matthew 13? He gave all those parables, and when the apostles asked, why do you speak to them parables? He said this, to you it is given to know the secrets of the kingdom, but to them it is not given, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Well, wait a minute. Was there something wrong with their ears? Was something wrong with their eyesight? Oh, not physically, no. They don't want to hear it. So you can just imagine them 5,000 people or 10,000 people, how many were there when he gave those parables? And they all come and he gives all those parables, and most of them went, that's interesting. And they all walked away. And there was a very small percentage that followed him in the house and said, explain it to us. Seekers, desirous of knowing. So there's a question we need to ask ourselves. How much do I desire to know and to understand? Or do I read something and go, I don't get that. I don't understand that. I just must be dumb. Okay, one thing you're not is dumb. And one thing you can do is understand. It may take you 10 years to understand some things. It's taken me 50 and I still don't understand some things. But you can do it. And you keep pursuing God. And that's the beauty of what God has asked us to do. But see, that has to do with the will again. How important is that to me? Because Satan is on the other end trying to get me to give up. So when you feel that inner desire, everybody does, that inner desire to just follow your own God, to follow what you want and you desire, you need to understand that Satan is trying to get you to ignore reality. Studying with some people right now that it is very, very difficult for me to get through to them that they're ignoring the reality. The reality is there's only two things that are going to happen. You're either going to listen to God and he's going to be your master, or you're going to listen to Satan and he's going to be your master. And you want to dabble in, but I do love to study, but you don't love to do. You don't love to give up things that you're accustomed to having. And you don't want God to be first in your life. You want to be first in your life. And you can dabble with God and then claim that you're religious and claim that you're a believer. But that's not the reality. God has given a very strong reality here, and when we want to follow ourselves, the reality is that we are ignoring what the end is going to be and what it is all about. So Jesus gave a very definitive description of Satan's character. He's a murderer and he's a liar. And he uses his lies to deceive people so that he can murder them. So what's that going to take for us? I really, really have to be perceptive of when he is trying to get me to compromise on things. I don't know about you, but the times when maybe my mind gets itself in most trouble is about 3 a.m. You start thinking about something that went on the day before or last week or whatever. And I don't know about you, now sometimes you come up with some brilliant things at 3 a.m. and you got to get up and just write it down. You go, that's really great. But more often than not, your brain starts blowing it out of proportion. And by the time you wake up, you're mad. And you're going, I can't believe that. And then under a normal circumstance, you calm down and you go, that was a silly way to draw that conclusion. That was not really legit. And you come maybe hopefully to your senses. So there's a care of what goes on in our brain. And Satan loves to do that. He loves to mess with us to get us to think outside of God's parameters. So the more we have God's word in our mind, the more we can defeat those thoughts. I don't know all that Satan does or how he puts thoughts in our minds, but he does. Somehow, some way, whether it's supernaturally or otherwise, but he does. And those bad thoughts get in our minds and we tend to expand on them. And the longer we're away from God's word, the easier that becomes. That our own reasoning becomes our own God. So, do doubting thoughts make you different than anybody else? Well, no. And sometimes people go, oh, I think my brain's just terrible. No, yeah, everybody, we all struggle with this. This is all part of what we deal with. And just to prove that, look at this. 2 passages talk about Judas. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was one of the number of the 12. John's account says, then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, what are you going to do? What you're going to do quickly. Notice that transition? Now, Judas has been stealing from the money bag for quite some time. Jesus obviously knew about it. But at this particular point, Satan enters his heart. So Satan's been working on him. And finally, Judas goes, okay. And Satan now is in control. Now all kinds of bad things are going to happen. So there's where this goes. And Satan is working on you. You and I are a priority. All Christians are a priority with Satan. I mean, he's already got the world. He can just make them badder. But he's trying to get us. Look at these words. When Jesus warns Peter, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you that he may sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Did you just wonder when it is in your life that Satan said to God, let me have her. Let me have him. I want to sift them like wheat. You'll see that when I'm done with them, they'll curse you to your face. And by that, Satan was able to get Peter to do something he swore he would never do. Deny the Lord. And he did. 3 times. Ever thought in your mind, I would never do thus and so? I have learned not to say that. I'm scared to say that. I am going to work really hard to never do that, but to just act like I'm above some sin. It's just not so, especially when you see what happened to Peter. In Matthew 6:13, one of the things that Jesus said to pray is, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, or some versions, the evil one. How important is it that we pray and that we pray for each other so that we do not fall to the temptations of the evil one? And how arrogant it is of us to think, not me. You know, King David would never, but he did. You can just see that all the way through the Bible. Very, very dangerous. So my point is, we have to be on our toes here. We have to really be aware of his presence and what he is attempting to do. We say, oh, this couldn't happen to one of us, or this couldn't happen to anybody in one of our churches. Let's see. Paul refers to it happening in the church at Rome. He refers to it happening in Acts. It refers to it happening in Ephesus. It happens in Corinth. He mentions it in the Corinthian letters. It happens in Hebrews and the churches there. It happens in James and all the churches he's writing to. It happens in John and all the churches he's writing to. It happens in 2 Peter and all the churches he's writing to. It happens in the book of Revelation and some of the churches that Jesus is speaking of. And it can't happen to us. Wow. Yes, it can. It calls on all of us to keep ourselves intact. Be careful. Satan is trying to use every word that comes out of your mouth And none of us can say, oh, I speak perfectly, or I've said that just right, or anything. We all make mistakes. And the worst thing about preaching is that you talk a lot, and therefore you can make even more. It is the way it is. So the danger is always there in a group. And what does the Lord say about it? Watch. Be vigilant. Be careful. He's always warning us about that and maintaining that kind of humility. So finally, just heightening some of our awarenesses here. And the first heightening of awareness is Satan is the prince and ruler of this world. I just don't think about that very much. But he is the ruler of this world. John 12, 31 and 32. Jesus says, now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. The ruler of this world, he refers to him. In John 14, 30, I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world is coming. Satan is the ruler of the world. In John 16, verse 8 and verse 11, and when the Holy Spirit comes, he will convict the world concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world is judged. Jesus came to dethrone him. But then look at what Paul says in Ephesians. And you were dead in your trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work. So even though he has been dethroned by the Lord, he is still at work in the sons of disobedience. Satan is extremely active. I think maybe unconsciously I had in my mind that he just kind of threw a evil bomb down on the earth now and then. But he is extremely active. 1 Peter 5:8, he's going about like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. He's always on the go. And he's grabbing even some small things in order to do that. To Jesus, he said, to you, this is Luke's account, which we don't read as much. To you I will give all this authority and their glory. That is the authority of over all the kingdoms. For it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will. If you then will worship me, it'll all be yours. Luke's account is not read as much as Matthew. Matthew doesn't say this. He says, it's all under my authority. It's been delivered to me. I can give it to whomever I will. Worship me, and it's yours. Now, what's Satan want? He wants to be the God of God. He wants to be the God. Wow. I kind of just thought he wanted to mess things up with God. No, he wants to be the God, and he wants trying to dethrone God. One of the interesting things about Satan is he cannot foresee. He's just like us. He can't see the future. He has no ability. If he could see the future, he wouldn't do what he did, because he'd know he's going to get defeated. But he thinks he's going to win. He thought he was. He knows now he's not. From Revelation 12:17, he knows now he's not. But he thought he was going to win. He thought he could dethrone. And that was where he was coming from. So everything was in his control. The whole world is in control. And the only way it isn't is because eventually he now knows he's going to be destroyed. But he is giving every last effort into destroying us. And we have to be on the alert. Now, just to illustrate this, this is where I think all of us, certainly me included, why is this acknowledgement and this awareness so important? Because we get really lazy in our minds. We get lazy in our awareness of what Satan's doing in our personal lives and our families. We allow little compromises to take place and do not realize how easily Satan takes advantage of the simplest little things. Could be the way we respond to others, could be media and what we look at or what we listen to, could be any number. And to us, it's just a small thing. It's nothing. It doesn't really bother me. No, he's grabbing that. He's taking it. It's just interesting how Satan uses some of the simple things to cause us to fall. I'm just going to use three quick ones. Number one, Peter, James, and John. Jesus takes them aside on that dreadful night and takes him aside and says, come with me and watch while I pray. Remember it? Watch while I pray. And what do the apostles do? They fall asleep. And he comes back and he wakes them up and he says, you have to pray and watch so that you don't enter into temptation. Oh, that was not the one I wanted yet. I thought I had the quote. I should have had it there. You need to pray that you don't enter into temptation. Now, what happened? They all scattered. Peter denied him 3 times. What if he had prayed? What if they hadn't have fallen asleep? How simple is it? I don't know how many times I read that and I'm thinking, it's 2 a.m. Kerch is going to sleep. If you want to pray, that's great. I can't stay awake. Okay, dum-dum. You're just like Peter, James, and John, and you're opening yourself up from that simple little thing, I fell asleep. You opened yourself up to a tragedy that was going to happen just a few hours from then. And you knew things, you had been warned that things were going to be tough. And you didn't take it seriously, and you didn't ask God to help. Simple. Just simple little things. I thought of this one too. This may be odd to you. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:5, he's talking to married people, he says, do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, and then come together again so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. There are marriages everywhere where the husband or the wife is depriving the other of sexual relations. It's happening all the time. Very quiet sin. That happens all the time. And he said that little simple thing, whether it's the husband or the wife, that little simple thing that we go, oh, no big deal. That little simple thing can lead Satan to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. And I think, look at the simple little things. I wouldn't have expected Paul to say that. Look at the simple little things that can lead to major errors and sin. Not just in lack of self-control, but in all the ramifications of what this might do to a marriage, what it might do to many, many circumstances within a person's life. And finally, the most important thing that we see in all of this is when the Lord in Isaiah 55, and you see the Messiah's words, says, seek the Lord while he may be found. This is urgent. There's a short little time. You go, I'll get around to being more diligent in knowing God and seeking God. I'll get around to that. No, seek the Lord while he may be found. As we saw in Ecclesiastes, you've got a brief little period of time where you have the energy and hopefully the desire to do what you ought to do. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Because if you don't, Satan's going to get in there. He's going to get in there and he's going to do something. So he says, here's the call. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way and the unrighteous man his thoughts. There's the battle. There's the reality. Satan's way, God's way. Put it a different way. My way and my thoughts, or God's way and God's thoughts. And Jesus' argument is this: for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. How many times do we think our thoughts are brilliant? But of course, I wouldn't be thinking something dumb, would I? No. Your thoughts and my thoughts and your ways and my ways have nowhere near any standing with God's thoughts and God's ways. We live with that. God gave us a tremendously smart brain. They're trying to recreate it in AI, and they can't do it, of course, and never will. But as great as it is, It's nowhere near God's thoughts and God's ways. So if there were lions roaring around your neighborhood, wandering all over the place, how diligent would you be about being careful when you went outside? Whew. Yeah, I'd be really careful. Be walking outside with a gun, And yet, Satan is not just outside, he's inside. And he can grab us at any time. Help me to look at this and be more aware. I hope in some ways it has helped you as well. So we're going to sing a song right now, and if there's any way we can help you and help each other in what God has provided for us, please let that be known while together we stand or while we sing.